So, there's a topic which I'd like to discuss, and this topic is what I, as a retail pharmacist, should do in light of the expanding use of the Pfizer vaccine into younger populations. So, because I'm a retail pharmacist, I am one of those few people who are almost exclusively responsible for making the final decision of who does and doesn't get the COVID vaccine, in particular, other vaccines in general. I've been watching these panels where they're discussing the expansion of the emergency use authorization of the COVID vaccines, and in the most recent one, many of the panel members believed that the vaccine should only be expanded the approval of the vaccine should only be expanded into certain populations of children. At least those panel members which seem to be discussing the data-driven benefits versus the risks. And they were frustrated and resented the question that they were being forced to vote on. Bizarrely, even after they were offered a new question if they were to vote no on the proposed expansion, bizarrely they all, as you know, voted yes except for the one who abstained. And the reason why they did it, they said, was because if they didn't vote yes, if it were not approved, then the expanded vaccine would not be available for anybody under the age of 11, which of course is not true, something that we'll discuss later. But it seems frustrating to me that many of these recommendations by the FDA and CDC are based not on clinical studies, but on these antibody neutralization assays. And this is for two reasons. One, the studies are nearly always done by these companies which have a financial interest in the expansion of the EUA. But also because antibody titers, while they might be a reasonable basis for actual clinical studies, they don't prove clinical benefit. We don't know how many arbitrary units, as they're called in these studies, how many arbitrary units are needed for protection, and what percentage of protection a person might get at any given level of antibody neutralization. And we know that this is true because we know that natural immunity does not give as high of a neutralization assay compared to people who are vaccinated but don't have natural immunity. And yet we know that natural immunity is better and more enduring than immunization. So what I would propose and what I would like to discuss is going with the recommendations of those members of the most recent panel, who would like to have voted yes on on the question. I would go with their recommendation, and I would say that we should be approving vaccination only on children who meet three criteria, and they have to meet all three. One, they cannot have a history of symptomatic COVID, meaning a positive COVID test and symptoms. They cannot have a history of that. Two, they must have a risk factor which places them at risk for an increased risk for severe illness. And I would go with the same list from the CDC website that we use for people who are under the age of 65 with a booster shot. The list is perfectly reasonable. I think it includes cardiovascular risk factors, asthma, obesity. They have to meet that criteria. And three, they don't have a risk factor which places them at increased risk for reactions to the vaccine, severe reactions. Or the other criteria that they can meet is a prescription from a doctor for the off-label use of the COVID vaccine. And off-label use of vaccines, just like other drugs, it's already possible with a prescription from a doctor. I tell people all the time who want to get a pneumonia shot who have already had one, many doctors want them to, so go get a prescription from their primary care doctor, and I would happily give them another dose of the pneumonia vaccine. Piperacillin tazobactam was approved for use in a very specific population. No doubt many people don't even know what that is, because the only criteria that we go off of is it empirically reasonable to use? Is it safe and effective? Does the culture show it's going to work? Then use it. And my final point is this: because the number of children who might be helped by the vaccine is exceedingly small, and just by chance they are almost certainly not the same children who would be hurt by the vaccine, a number which is also exceedingly small, at best the administration of the vaccine to the general population of children would be nothing more than changing the children who are harmed from one group to another group, and I don't think that we should be trading lives.